Remember when Stephen A. Smith said this about Antonio Brown?
Well, what I make of it is that he's a disgrace, and there's no way to slice that.
Well, AB hasn't forgotten, and now he's finally firing back, live on IG.
That's all we get is hate. Call God.
Things are getting heated, and I have all of the details. The seeds of war, how a media titan made an enemy. The rivalry between Stephen A. Smith and Antonio Brown just hit a whole new level. Brown launched what can only be described as a full-blown social media assault, aimed not just at Smith, but the entire NFL establishment. To understand the devastating nature of Brown's attack, we need to first examine the years of buildup that led to this explosive moment. Stephen A. Smith had been one of Brown's most vocal critics, particularly during Brown's chaotic exit from the Oakland Raiders in 2019. Smith had declared Brown a disgrace and said he was absolutely positively embarrassing and should be ashamed of himself.
Well, what I make of it is that he's a disgrace, and there's no way to slice that. I can't excuse the kind of behavior that he has exhibited. It's absolutely positively embarrassing. He should be ashamed of himself. His family should be ashamed of him. His friends should be ashamed of him. And nobody should condone this kind of behavior, because when you look at it, you can talk about whether it was orchestrated or not or whatever. It makes absolutely no sense.
What made Smith's criticism particularly stinging was his systematic breakdown of Brown's behavior, treating each incident not as an isolated mistake, but as part of a larger pattern of self-sabotage that bordered on the incomprehensible. Smith methodically laid out Brown's transgressions.
You forced your way out of Pittsburgh, even though a lot of people didn't like that. I was speaking to him at that particular moment in time. It was a business decision. Guaranteed money had ran out. He wanted to go someplace else.
The ESPN personality then turned his attention to Brown's bizarre behavior with the Raiders, each point delivered like a hammer blow to Brown's reputation.
Well, what was your excuse in Oakland? You got the guaranteed dollars you were looking for, A. B, the cryotherapy treatment that went wrong and made you have the ugliest feet on the planet that you decided to show to everybody as if we wanted to see that. Okay, that had nothing to do with the Raiders.
Smith's critique wasn't just about the feet incident, though that bizarre episode had certainly captured headlines. It was about the helmet grievances, the confrontations with coaching staff, and what Smith saw as a pattern of manufactured drama designed to engineer Brown's way out of yet another organization.
The helmet issue, not just one grievance, but two grievances. That had nothing to do with the Raiders. The helmet that you couldn't discover, you couldn't find one to wear, even though they have 40 different options.
What perhaps stung Brown the most was Smith's emphasis on how unique Brown's behavior was, even in a league filled with prima donna wide receivers and high-maintenance superstars.
And over 2,000 players were in the NFL at the time, because you had 89 dudes on the roster. Only one man was filing a grievance and threatening to retire. One man. Not Tom Brady, not Aaron Rodgers, nobody. Just Antonio Brown.
The confrontation with Raiders general manager Mike Mayock became another focal point of Smith's criticism, particularly Brown's use of a racial epithet during the heated exchange.
And then, you stand up, John Gruden, you go to Mike Mayock, you threaten to punch him in the face, you call him a cracker or whatever. Now, I am not a white individual, so y'all have to tell me what that means to y'all. But I know that as a black man, if you called me the N-word and you weren't black, we'd have a problem.
Smith's ability to frame Brown's behavior in terms of broader principles and consequences was what made his criticism so effective and so infuriating to its target.
So you reverse that. As a black man calling a white person a cracker, how are they supposed to take that? These are all the things that you did, and we're supposed to believe it was in an effort to walk away from $20 million in additional guarantees.
The buildup of these criticisms, combined with Brown's inability to secure another NFL opportunity, created a perfect storm of resentment that would eventually explode in the most dramatic fashion possible. By September 2020, Brown had been watching from the sidelines for nearly a year, seeing other players with troubled pasts find opportunities while he remained effectively blackballed from the league. Then came the explosion that shocked the sports world. In a series of tweets that would be remembered as one of the most explosive social media meltdowns in sports history, Brown didn't just attack Smith's commentary. He attacked his very identity as a black man. The centerpiece of Brown's assault was his endorsement of a post labeling Stephen A. Smith and Uncle Tom, one of the most loaded and inflammatory terms that can be used against a black public figure. The term Uncle Tom, originally derived from Harriet Beecher Stowe's 1852 novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, has evolved into one of the most cutting racial epithets that can be directed at a black person, implying that they have betrayed their own community by seeking seeking favor with white authority figures. When Brown endorsed this characterization of Smith, he wasn't just calling him a sellout, he was questioning Smith's authenticity as a black man and suggesting that his criticism of Brown and other black athletes was motivated by a desire to curry favor with his white employers at ESPN. It was an attack designed to cut to the very core of Smith's identity and credibility within the black community. But this wasn't Brown's first use of this devastating weapon. In 2019, he had deployed the same term against former Pittsburgh Steelers teammate Ryan Clark, who had criticized Brown's behavior during his tumultuous final days with the team. The pattern revealed that Brown saw this as his weapon of choice against black critics, a way to delegitimize their criticism by questioning their racial authenticity. The 2019 incident with Clark had occurred after the former safety suggested on SportsCenter that the Pittsburgh Steelers should trade Brown due to his disruptive behavior, citing incidents like Brown's Facebook live stream of Coach Mike Tomlin's post-game locker room comments. Clark had stated that Brown's actions were harming team chemistry and that the organization needed to prioritize unity over individual talent. Brown's response had been swift and personal, commenting "Uncle Tom" on an ESPN NFL Instagram post featuring Clark's criticism. The attack was particularly cutting because Clark and Brown had been teammates, making the accusation feel like a betrayal of their shared history. Clark's response to Brown's attack had been notably measured, attempting to diffuse the situation with humor while also addressing the broader implications. He had noted on Twitter that he had "a ton of nieces and nephews that I love so much," trying to turn the insult into something lighter while maintaining his dignity. But the attack on Smith was far more comprehensive and devastating. Brown's assault was part of a much larger tirade that included accusations of racism against the NFL, personal attacks on former teammates like Ben Roethlisberger, whom he called a rake, and a general declaration of war against the entire sports establishment. The impact of Brown's attack was immediate and far-reaching, with sports media outlets across the country covering the story and noting that Brown had essentially burned bridges with one of the most influential figures in sports media. But more than that, the attack was seen as Brown essentially ending whatever remained of his NFL career, as league executives began to view him as completely unpredictable and potentially toxic to any organization. Stephen A. Smith's response to the attack was notably restrained, at least initially. Rather than engaging in a public Twitter war, Smith used his platform on First Take to address the broader issues that Brown's outburst had raised, acknowledging the pain and frustration that many black athletes felt while maintaining his right to criticize players when their behavior warranted it. But the damage was done. Brown had crossed a line that even many of his previous defenders couldn't ignore, using racial epithets against fellow black professionals in a way that undermined whatever legitimate points he might have been trying to make about his treatment by the league. The Uncle Tom attack wasn't just about Brown's relationship with Smith, it was about the complex position that black sports commentators occupy in American media. They are expected to provide credible analysis and criticism of all athletes, regardless of race, while also serving as representatives and advocates for the black community. When those roles conflict, as they did in Brown's case, the results can be explosive. Smith himself had addressed this tension in previous commentary, discussing how he faced criticism from within the black community for holding black athletes accountable.
Stephen A. Smith is a sellout. Stephen A. Smith's an Uncle Tom. Stephen A. Smith ain't black. You ain't one of us. These are the kind of things that was said to me yesterday.
Smith had revealed in one segment, showing how Brown's attack was part of a larger pattern of criticism he faced. Smith's response to such criticism was characteristically defiant.
I stand by everything that I said yesterday, tenfold, 100-fold. And I don't care who in the black community disagrees with me. I'm not interested in their disagreement on this particular issue because they're not looking at the bigger picture here.
While Antonio Brown's explosive confrontation with Stephen A. Smith captured headlines for its raw intensity and racial implications, it was far from the only high-profile feud that would define Smith's career as sports media's most controversial voice. Perhaps even more significant, and certainly more ongoing, has been Smith's complex and often contentious relationship with LeBron James, the man many consider the greatest basketball player of his generation. The King's Wrath, when LeBron James entered Smith's crosshairs. The relationship between Stephen A. Smith and LeBron James represents one of sports media's most fascinating dynamics, a collision between an unstoppable force of commentary and an immovable object of athletic greatness. Their feud, which has simmered and boiled over multiple times throughout the years, reached a dramatic crescendo in 2025 when personal became professional and professional became deeply, irreparably personal. The seeds of their conflict were planted years ago, rooted in Smith's consistent refusal to crown LeBron as the greatest of all time, GOAT, GOAT in basketball. While the sports world debated endlessly between Michael Jordan and LeBron James for basketball supremacy, Smith remained firmly in Jordan's camp, consistently ranking LeBron as number 2 despite his incredible achievements. This wasn't just professional analysis for Smith, it was a deeply held conviction that he defended with the fervor of a true believer. But the real explosion came in early 2025, when Smith made comments that would transform their professional disagreement into something far more personal and dangerous. The catalyst wasn't LeBron's own performance, but rather Smith's critique of LeBron's son, Bronny James, and the circumstances surrounding his entry into the NBA. On January the 29th, 2025, during an episode of First Take, Smith questioned whether Bronny deserved to be in the NBA, suggesting he should be in the G League instead. The implication was clear and cutting, that Bronny's position with the Los Angeles Lakers was due more to his father's influence than his own basketball merit. Bronny was only in the NBA because of his dad, Smith declared, crossing a line that LeBron would not tolerate. The confrontation that followed was the kind of raw, unscripted drama that sports media dreams are made of. On March 6, 2025, during a Lakers game against the New York Knicks at Crypto.com Arena, LeBron approached Smith, who was sitting courtside during a timeout. What happened next was captured by lip readers and became the subject of intense speculation and analysis across the sports world. Yo, you gotta stop talking about my son. You gotta stop with my son. That's my son. That's my son, LeBron reportedly told Smith, his voice carrying the kind of parental fury that transcends professional relationships and cuts straight to the heart of what matters most. Lip readers interpreted LeBron as telling Smith to keep my son out of this, bro, making it clear that this wasn't about basketball analysis, it was about family. But Smith wasn't about to back down. He called the confrontation weak, while also making it clear that he had been criticizing LeBron as a father figure and decision maker, not attacking Bronny personally.
I didn't think that Pat McAfee disrespected me or did me wrong in any way. He did his job and I got no problems with it. My issue is with LeBron James. And I just want to say for the record, LeBron James is full of it,
Smith declared, escalating the conflict rather than seeking resolution. The most explosive moment came when Smith addressed the physical dynamics of their confrontation.
And let me state for the record that while we bring up that, let me assure you it wouldn't have gone down like that. I would have gotten my ass kicked, because had that man put his hands on me, I would have immediately swung on him. That I'm not going to tolerate.
LeBron's response to Smith's comments was swift and cutting. On March 26, 2025, appearing on the Pat McAfee show, LeBron criticized Smith for making personal attacks rather than focusing on basketball, describing the media attention around their feud as a Taylor Swift tour run for Smith, a reference to the massive publicity Smith was receiving from their conflict. But LeBron wasn't finished. After scoring a late winner against the Indiana Pacers that same night, he posted a video on Instagram of Smith boxing with a womp womp sound effect, mocking Smith's earlier claims about being ready to fight. The post was a masterclass in social media trolling, using Smith's own words and bravado against him while celebrating his on-court success. Smith's response was swift and comprehensive. On March 27, 2025, he opened First Take with a nearly 16-minute rant calling LeBron full of it and a liar, particularly regarding his claims about criticism of his son.
And in this particular instance, as it pertains to his son, he is a liar. And he went on national television today and he lied again.
But Smith went further, revealing what he saw as LeBron's true character. He accused LeBron of being shady, passive-aggressive, and two-faced, stating that their mutual dislike was long-standing and fundamental. This wasn't just about the Bronny comments, it was about years of accumulated tension between two alpha personalities who had never truly respected each other. The feud revealed deeper issues about Smith's approach to covering superstar athletes and his willingness to criticize even the most beloved figures in sports. His consistent ranking of Michael Jordan above LeBron in GOAT debates had always been a source of tension, but the Bronny situation had made their conflict personal in ways that professional disagreements rarely become. Smith's criticism extended beyond just basketball analysis to personal character judgments, including accusations that LeBron had missed significant events like Dwyane Wade's Hall of Fame ceremony and Kobe Bryant's memorial, though these claims were disputed and often lacked proper context, such as LeBron missing Wade's ceremony due to his son's cardiac arrest. The ongoing nature of their feud highlighted the complex dynamics of modern sports media, where personal relationships, professional obligations, and social media interactions create a volatile mix that can explode at any moment. Smith's platform gave him enormous power to shape public opinion about LeBron's career and character, while LeBron's massive social media following and cultural influence provided him with weapons to fight back in ways that previous generations of athletes couldn't have imagined. The irony of their conflict was that it actually proved some of Smith's broader points about athlete accountability and the responsibilities that come with platform and influence. influence. LeBron's willingness to confront Smith publicly, while understandable from a parental perspective, also demonstrated the kind of emotional decision-making that Smith often criticized in his commentary. As their feud continued to evolve throughout 2025, it became clear that this wasn't just another sports media controversy that would fade with the next news cycle. The personal nature of their conflict, combined with their enormous platforms and influence, had created a dynamic that would continue to shape conversations about sports media, athlete coverage, and the boundaries between professional criticism and personal attack. The LeBron-Smith feud represented everything that made Stephen A. Smith both compelling and controversial as a media figure. His willingness to take on anyone, regardless of their stature, combined with his occasional tendency to let personal feelings influence his professional judgment. It was sports media at its most raw and unfiltered, and it showed no signs of resolution as both men continued to defend their positions with the kind of stubborn pride that had made them successful in their respective fields. Smith's battles with football's elite. The explosive confrontations with Antonio Brown and LeBron James weren't isolated incidents in Stephen A. Smith's career. They were part of a larger pattern of conflicts that revealed both his willingness to take on anyone and his particular talent for getting under the skin of elite athletes. Perhaps nowhere was this more evident than in his relationships with NFL superstars, where his commentary style and moral positions had created a collection of feuds that read like a who's who of football greatness. Among the most bitter and personal of these conflicts was Smith's ongoing war with Owens, a feud that had simmered for years before exploding into public view with a viciousness that surprised even seasoned observers of sports media drama. The conflict between Smith and Owens represented more than just professional disagreement. It was a battle over representation, authenticity, and the role of black sports commentators in covering black athletes. The origins of the Smith-Owens feud traced back to a 2019 appearance by Owens on First Take during a discussion about Colin Kaepernick. In what would become one of the most inflammatory moments in sports television history, Owens made a comment that cut Smith to his core, suggesting that Max Kellerman, Smith's white co-host at the time, almost seems blacker than you, Stephen A. The implication was devastating, that Kellerman showed more empathy and understanding for Kaepernick's situation than Smith, despite their racial differences. Smith's reaction was immediate and visceral. He told Owens he had crossed the line, interpreting the comment not just as criticism of his position, but as a fundamental attack on his identity as a black man. The incident created a rift that would fester for years, with Smith claiming that Owens subsequently attempted to sue him over the exchange, though Smith described the legal action as going nowhere. The feud reignited with unprecedented fury in September 2023 when Owens retweeted a clip of his 2019 First Take appearance, seemingly trying to connect Smith's criticism of Kellerman, who had been let go by ESPN, to their old conflict. Smith's response was explosive, taking to social media to call Owens a sorry and threatening to expose him for all the things he tried to do behind the scenes to brothers over the years. Owens fired back with equal intensity, accusing Smith of using his platform to tarnish and attack his character, and suggesting that Smith targeted black athletes like himself, Kyrie Irving, Colin Kaepernick, and Kevin Durant to satisfy network demands and secure his paycheck. The accusation was particularly damaging because it suggested that Smith's criticism wasn't motivated by legitimate concerns, but by a desire to appease his white employers. On September 18th, 2023, Smith dedicated an entire episode of The Stephen A. Smith Show to addressing the feud, explaining that his beef with Owens stemmed from the lawsuit attempt and denying that he had any role in Kellerman's departure from ESPN. But despite his threats to expose Owens, Smith's response was notably lacking in the devastating revelations he had promised, leading Owens to dismiss the entire segment as baloney. The Smith-Owens conflict highlighted the complex position that black sports commentators occupy in American media, caught between expectations to provide objective analysis and pressure to support black athletes. The involvement of other figures like Kyrie Irving, who called for them to clear the air without all of the extra social media back and forth, showed how their personal feud had broader implications for the sports community. But Smith's conflicts with NFL stars extended far beyond his battles with Antonio Brown and Terrell Owens. His approach to commentary, mixing moral judgments with sports analysis, had created tensions with numerous players who felt that his criticism crossed professional lines into personal territory. Smith's commentary style was particularly evident in his coverage of players' off-field behavior, where he often took positions that put him at odds with athlete culture. His frequent use of the phrase "stay off the weed" when addressing players' marijuana-related issues became both a trademark and a source of controversy, with players like Stedman Bailey and others finding themselves targets of his moral commentary. One of the most revealing aspects of Smith's approach was his willingness to make his criticism deeply personal, often invoking family and community shame as part of his commentary arsenal. When he criticized Antonio Antonio Brown, he didn't just attack Brown's professional decisions. He suggested that his family should be ashamed of him, and his friends should be ashamed of him, expanding the scope of his criticism to include Brown's entire support network. This approach reflected Smith's broader philosophy about athlete responsibility and the obligations that come with platform and influence. He consistently argued that professional athletes, particularly black athletes, had special responsibilities to their communities, and that their behavior reflected on more than just themselves. This perspective, while sometimes appreciated for its moral clarity, also created inevitable conflicts with players who felt that their personal lives were being subjected to unfair scrutiny. The pattern that emerged from Smith's various NFL feuds revealed a consistent approach: identify behavior he considered problematic, deliver comprehensive criticism that often included moral judgments, and then defend his position regardless of the personal or professional consequences. This approach had made him one of the most influential voices in sports media, but it had also created a collection of enemies among the very athletes he covered. The effectiveness of Smith's approach was undeniable. His reported $8 million per year contract and massive platform gave him enormous influence in shaping public opinion about athletes and their behavior. When Stephen A. Smith decided that an athlete was problematic, millions of viewers heard about it, and the impact on that athlete's reputation could be significant and lasting. But the costs of his approach were also becoming clear. His willingness to make criticism personal and to invoke broader community shame had created a dynamic where athletes felt compelled to fight back, often in ways that escalated conflicts beyond their original scope. The result was a series of ongoing feuds that revealed as much about the dynamics of sports media as they did about the athletes being covered. The evolution of these conflicts also reflected broader changes in how athletes could respond to media criticism. Social media had democratized communication in ways that allowed athletes to fight back directly, bypassing traditional media gatekeepers and speaking directly to their fans. This shift had made Smith's job more complicated, as his targets could now respond immediately and forcefully to his criticism. Perhaps most significantly, Smith's various feuds revealed the complex intersection of race, media, and sports in America. His position as a prominent black commentator covering predominantly black sports created expectations and tensions that white commentators didn't face. Athletes like Antonio Brown, Terrell Owens, and others had used racial language and accusations to undermine his credibility, suggesting that his criticism represented a form of racial betrayal rather than legitimate journalism. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.